Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going behind the scenes of Google's Meridian product.
Okay.
You know, their platform for building marketing mix models.
Right.
You've sent over a stack of research papers,
Yes.
and it looks like these papers form the scientific foundation for Meridian.
Ah, that's right.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
What I'm really excited about is that these papers dive deep into some serious challenges
Yeah.
in the world of MMM stuff that anyone who's built these models has probably run into.
And it's interesting to see how Google's researchers approach these challenges, especially since these papers were published between 2017 and 2021.
All right.
So it gives us a glimpse into the evolution of their thinking over time.
Right. It's like peeking into their lab notebooks as they were developing Meridian.
Oh.
Okay, so let's dive in. One thing that jumps out at me is this paper 3804.pdf,
Okay.
where they tackle the issue of limited data using what they call geo-level Bayesian hierarchical media mix modeling.
Right.
That's a mouthful. But the idea seems pretty straightforward. If you don't have enough data at the national level, break things down geographically to get more granular insights.
It's a clever approach, and the paper actually shows how effective it can be.
Okay.
They use an example from the auto industry where they had limited national level data and found that using this geo-level approach led to significantly more accurate ROAS estimates.
Wow.
I bet that was music to those auto marketers' ears.
Definitely. You know, one of the biggest headaches I've always had with MMMs is dealing with these so-called carryover effects, where the impact of an ad campaign lingers long after it's finished.
Yeah.
It's like trying to measure the ripples from a stone thrown in a pond.
Yeah.
They keep spreading outward even after the stone has sunk. Does any of this research touch on that?
Absolutely. In 3806.pdf, they really get into the nitty-gritty of modeling these carryover effects,
Right.
exploring different ad stock transformations that capture how the impact of an ad decays over time. They even go a step further and discuss something called the shape effect, which accounts for the diminishing returns you see with increased media investment.
Diminishing returns, like how that second cup of coffee in the morning doesn't give you the same jolt as the first?
Exactly. They use a mathematical function called the Hill transformation to model this,
Okay.
which helps you find that sweet spot where you're getting the most out of your ad spend without wasting money on saturation. And what's fascinating is that they acknowledge that there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
They even discuss using model selection techniques to find the best ad stock and shape transformations for your specific data.
That makes sense. Every business, every campaign is different.
Right.
What works for one might not work for another. So it sounds like they're emphasizing a data-driven approach to fine-tuning these models. But one thing I'm really curious about is how they address ad targeting bias.
Yeah.
It's such a tricky problem if your campaigns are naturally attracting specific customer segments. How do you truly measure their effectiveness across the board? I feel like I'm always battling this issue.
You're not alone. And that's precisely what they tackle in 4388.pdf.
Okay.
They argue that one of the main culprits of ad targeting bias is the fact that ad spending is often influenced by consumer demand. Think about it. Businesses tend to ramp up their search ads when they see a surge in relevant search queries.
Yeah, it's like trying to measure the effectiveness of a fishing net when you've cast it in a spot that's already teeming with fish.
Yeah.
How do you know how much of your catch is due to the net itself versus the abundance of fish in that particular spot?
Exactly. So to address this, they introduced this really clever technique called selection bias correction, or SBC.
Okay.
Essentially, they incorporate search query volume data into the model as a proxy for consumer demand.
Interesting.
By doing this, they can start to tease apart the impact of organic search from paid search, giving you a clearer picture of how much your ads are actually contributing to the sales lift.
So instead of just looking at how many fish you caught, you're also considering how many fish were already swimming around in the area. It's like adjusting for the natural abundance of fish before you evaluate your fishing skills.
Precisely. And what's impressive is that they show in one case study that a naive ROAS estimate for search ads was 15 times higher
Wow.
than the estimate obtained using SBC.
Yeah.
It's a huge difference. It highlights how crucial it is to account for this bias if you want to get accurate insights.
A 15-fold difference. That's eye-opening. Okay, we've talked about limited deep carryover effects and ad targeting bias.
Yeah.
It seems like they're really hitting on some of the biggest pain points for anyone who's worked with MMMs. What I'm wondering now is, do these papers offer any solutions for calibrating these models, making sure they align with real-world data?
They do. 7494.pdf directly addresses the challenge of MMM calibration.
Okay.
What's interesting here is they propose a method where you actually restructure the model to include ROAS as a direct input. It's not as complicated as it sounds.
Okay.
Think of it like having a fine-tuning knob specifically for ROAS.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So instead of just getting a ROAS estimate as
No.
an output, you can actually adjust it directly based on your own knowledge or experiment results.
Exactly. It's a much more transparent and intuitive way to calibrate the model.
Okay.
And their simulations showed this method led to significantly more accurate ROAS estimates.
Okay, so we've got techniques for handling limited data modeling carryover effects, addressing ad targeting bias, and even calibrating the model.
Yeah.
Feeling smarter already. But there's one more paper,
Yeah.
3805.pdf, that I want to touch on before we wrap up this segment. It talks about using category-level data to improve MMM accuracy.
Okay.
I'm curious to hear more about this.
That's a really important point, especially when you're dealing with data sparsity, which is a common problem for individual brands. Think of it like trying to bake a cake with only a handful of flour and sugar. You might get something resembling a cake, but it won't be very substantial.
Right. You need more ingredients to create a delicious and satisfying cake.
Exactly. And that's where category-level data comes in. By pooling data from multiple brands within a category, you're essentially borrowing ingredients from your neighbors to complete your recipe.
I see.
You get more data points, which can lead to more robust and informative estimates for individual brands.
So it's like a collaborative cake baking effort where everyone benefits from sharing their resources.
Precisely. They demonstrate this concept with examples from the soda and shampoo industries, showing how incorporating category-level data led to more accurate estimates for individual brands.
I love that analogy. Okay, so by borrowing strength from the category, individual brands can get a clearer picture of what's driving their sales. This is fascinating stuff. We've covered a lot of ground, but before we move on, I want to take a step back and think about the bigger picture here.
Okay.
So we've seen how Google's researchers are tackling some of the thorniest issues in MMMs,
Right.
from data limitations and carryover effects to ad targeting bias and calibration. And it seems like these papers aren't just theoretical exercises,
Yeah.
but rather the building blocks for Meridian, their own MMM platform.
Exactly. What's interesting here is that these papers give us a glimpse into Google's approach to MMMs, an approach that seems to emphasize data-driven techniques,
Right.
flexibility, and a deep understanding of the challenges marketers face in the real world.
Right. And by understanding these challenges and the solutions they've proposed,
Yes.
we can start to apply these insights to our own MMM efforts, regardless of whether we're using Meridian or building our own models.
Absolutely. And that's what makes the deep dive so valuable.
Yeah.
It's not just about understanding the research. It's about connecting the dots and finding practical applications for this knowledge.
Exactly. So in the next segment, let's delve deeper into the practical implications of these findings and how we can use these insights to build more robust and insightful MMMs.
Sounds like a plan. Welcome back to the deep dive.
Okay, so last time we talked about how Google's researchers tackled some of the big challenges in MMMs, things like limited data, carryover effects, and ad targeting bias.
Yeah.
We even saw how their research laid the groundwork for their Meridian product.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to see the evolution of their thinking as they built this platform. But now I'm curious, how do these insights translate into building better MMMs for the rest of us?
That's the key question, right? These papers give us a blueprint for approaching MMMs with a more sophisticated and nuanced perspective.
One thing that really stuck with me from the last segment was the paper that highlighted the limitations of MMMs.
Yeah.
Even with all these fancy techniques, it's like they're saying, hey, these models are powerful, but don't get carried away.
Right. That paper, 3803.pdf, serves as a reality check.
Right.
It reminds us that MMMs are tools, and like any tool, they have their limitations. It's crucial to understand those limitations and use them responsibly.
One limitation they emphasized was the potential for bias in MMM results. And we talked about how even with advanced techniques like GBH-MMM or SBC, bias can still creep in. It's like trying to bake a cake with a slightly off recipe. You might end up with something that looks like a cake, but the taste might not be quite right.
That's a great analogy. And the paper digs into some of the reasons why this happens.
Okay.
For example, MMMs rely on observational data, which means we're looking at what happened in the past and trying to make sense of it. But the past can be a messy and unpredictable place.
Totally. There are always factors that influence both ad spending and sales that we might not be able to fully account for in our models.
Yeah.
Things like changes in the economy, competitor activity, even things like the weather can have an impact.
Exactly. And even if we try to include those factors in our models,
Right.
there's always a risk that we've missed something important or that our measurement of those factors isn't perfect.
So what can we do about it? How can we build MMMs that are more robust to bias? Is it all about just being really careful with the data we choose?
Well, careful data selection is definitely part of it. We need to be critical of our data sources, understand their limitations, and look for any potential biases that might be baked in.
Right.
But it goes beyond just the data itself.
So what else is involved?
Well, we need to think about using robust modeling techniques that are less susceptible to bias.
Okay.
We've already talked about some of the approaches Google explored, like GBH-MMM and SBC, which were designed to address specific types of bias.
It's like using stronger building materials to construct our model.
Yeah.
So it can withstand the storms of bias.
I love that analogy. And there are other techniques we can use, like sensitivity analysis. It's essentially like stress testing our model. We systematically change different inputs or assumptions to see how much the results are affected.
Okay.
If our results are wildly different with just small tweaks, it might be a sign that our model is too sensitive to those factors and might not be very reliable.
That's a great point. It's like making sure our cake recipe can handle a slightly hotter oven or a bit more flour without completely falling apart.
Yeah.
But even if we do everything right, choose our data carefully, use robust modeling techniques, and stress test our models. The paper also cautions against claiming causality from MMM results. Can you explain why that is?
This is where things get really tricky. Remember, with MMMs, we're analyzing what happened in the past. We're looking at correlations between things like ad spending and sales. But we can't definitively say that one caused the other.
It's like seeing a bunch of people wearing raincoats and assuming it must be raining.
Right.
But maybe they're just coming from a water balloon fight. We're observing a correlation, but we don't know the true cause.
Exactly. There could be other factors at play that we haven't accounted for.
Yeah.
Maybe there was a huge social media campaign that drove sales, or maybe a competitor went out of business, boosting demand. It's hard to tease apart all the possible explanations with just observational data.
So what can we do? Are we just stuck with correlations? Is there any way to get closer to proving causation with MMMs?
Well, there are some things we can do to strengthen our claims. The gold standard, of course, is conducting controlled experiments.
Yeah.
This is where you randomly assign different groups to different treatments, like different ad campaigns,
Right.
and measure the impact.
It's like doing a taste test for our cake, where we have a control group that gets the original recipe and another group that gets a slightly different version. By comparing the results, we can see if the change of the recipe actually made a difference in taste.
Precisely. Now, controlled experiments can be expensive and time-consuming, but they provide the strongest evidence for causation.
Right.
But if they're not feasible, there are other approaches like quasi-experimental methods.
Okay, I'm getting flashbacks to stats class. Can you explain quasi-experimental methods in a way that doesn't make my head spin?
Think of it like trying to create a controlled experiment in the wild where we can't randomly assign people to groups. We're looking for situations where something has changed naturally in a way that allows us to compare groups that are similar in most respects, except for the factor we're interested in.
So, like comparing the sales of our cake in two different cities, where one city had a billboard campaign for the cake and the other didn't.
Yeah.
But we'd have to make sure the cities are similar in terms of demographics, income levels, and other things that could affect cake consumption.
Exactly. The key is to find situations where the factor we're interested in is as good as randomly assigned,
Okay.
which allows us to make stronger causal claims. And then there's the power of combining MMMs with other sources of information.
Right. It's like getting feedback from our cake tasters.
Yeah.
If our MMM suggests that adding chocolate chips to the batter boosted sales, and our taste testers rave about the chocolate chips, it strengthens our claim that the chips are a key driver of cake satisfaction.
Exactly. By triangulating our findings from different sources, MMM results, customer surveys, market research, we can build a more compelling case for causation.
This is all really helpful. It feels like we're starting to build a toolkit for approaching MMMs in a more thoughtful and nuanced way.
Yeah.
But I'm also wondering, for those of us who aren't data scientists, what are the key takeaways from all this? How can marketers and business leaders effectively use MMMs in their decision-making?
That's a great question. First and foremost, it's important to remember that MMMs are tools, powerful tools, but tools nonetheless. They don't replace human judgment or intuition. They enhance it.
It's like having a high-tech oven that can help us bake a better cake.
Yeah.
But we still need to understand the basics of baking and use our senses to create something delicious.
I love that. It's about finding the right balance between data-driven insights and human expertise.
Right.
And I think that's a theme that runs through all these papers, the importance of blending the rigor of data science with the creativity and strategic thinking of marketing.
Right. It's about using MMMs to inform our decisions, not dictate them.
Exactly. And it's crucial to choose the right MMM for the job. There's no one-size-fits-all model. The best choice will depend on your specific business goals, the data you have available, and the level of complexity you're comfortable with.
It's like choosing the right cake pan.
Yeah.
You wouldn't use a boot pan if you're trying to make a sheet cake.
Perfect analogy. And of course, data quality is paramount.
Right.
The accuracy of your MMM results hinges on the quality of the data you feed it. Garbage in, garbage out, as they say.
Speaking of garbage, one of the biggest takeaways for me is the importance of understanding and mitigating bias. It's like realizing that our oven might be calibrated slightly off, and we need to adjust our baking time accordingly.
Exactly. And then there's the whole causation versus correlation issue.
All right.
MMMs can help us see patterns in relationships, but we can't blindly assume causation. We need to be critical thinkers and look for converging evidence from multiple sources before drawing firm conclusions.
Right. It's like having a smoke detector that goes off. We don't automatically assume the house is on fire.
Right.
We investigate, look for other signs, and use our judgment to determine the best course of action.
Exactly. And finally, I think it's important to remember that MMMs are not a one-time exercise. They need to be continuously monitored, updated, and refined as new data becomes available and the business environment changes.
It's like tending a garden. We need to nurture our MMMs, prune away the dead leaves, and add fertilizer to keep them healthy and flourishing. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've explored the challenges of bias and causality in MMMs, and we've discussed some practical strategies for mitigating bias, strengthening causal claims, and using MMMs responsibly. We even touched on the importance of the human element in this data-driven world. But I'm curious, what does the future hold for MMMs? Where do you see this field heading in the next few years?
That's a great question, and one that I think everyone in the marketing analytics space is grappling with. One thing that's clear is that the amount of data we have access to is only going to continue to explode.
Right, it's like we're drinking from a fire hose of data. But is more data always a good thing?
It can be both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, more data gives us a richer understanding of customer behavior and a finer-grained view of how our marketing efforts are performing. But on the other hand, it also creates new challenges in terms of data management, processing, and analysis.
It's like having a giant pantry stocked with every ingredient imaginable.
Yeah.
It's amazing to have so many options, but it can also be overwhelming trying to figure out what to make with it all.
Exactly. And that's where the field of data science is stepping up to meet these challenges.
Okay.
We're seeing incredible advances in machine learning and artificial intelligence, which are helping us sift through massive data sets and extract meaningful insights.
So it's like having a team of expert chefs who can help us navigate our data pantry and create culinary masterpieces.
I love that analogy. And another trend that I think will continue to gain momentum is the focus on real-time measurement and optimization.
Okay.
Marketers are no longer content with waiting weeks or months to see the impact of their campaigns.
Right.
They want to be able to make adjustments on the fly in real time as the data comes in.
It's like having a thermometer in our cake batter that tells us the exact temperature at all times, allowing us to adjust the oven settings to ensure the cake bakes perfectly.
Precisely. And we're already seeing this real-time capability being built into MMM platforms, including Google's Meridian. This allows marketers to be much more agile and responsive, tweaking their strategies as needed to maximize their impact.
Okay, so more data, more sophisticated tools, and real-time measurement. What else do you see on the horizon for MMMs?
Well, another exciting development is the integration of MMMs with other marketing technologies like marketing automation platforms, customer relationship management, CRM systems, and attribution modeling tools.
So it's like connecting our high-tech oven with our refrigerator pantry and recipe database, creating a seamless and integrated kitchen where we can effortlessly whip up culinary delights.
Exactly. This integration allows for a much more holistic and unified view of the customer journey, giving marketers a better understanding of how different touchpoints interact and influence customer behavior.
It's like being able to trace the journey of each ingredient in our cake, from the farm to the store to our kitchen, and see how it all comes together to create the final product. This is all incredibly exciting. Like the future of MMMs is full of possibilities. But amidst all this technological advancement, I have to ask, what about the role of data scientists and modelers? Will they still be relevant in this brave new world of automated marketing measurement?
Absolutely. While technology is becoming increasingly sophisticated, human expertise is more crucial than ever. Data scientists and modelers will play a vital role in designing, implementing, and interpreting these complex MMMs.
So it's like having a master baker who understands the science of baking, the art of flavor combinations,
Yes.
and the nuances of different ingredients. Technology can enhance their skills, but it can't replace their expertise.
Exactly. Human judgment and intuition will always be essential,
Right.
especially when it comes to things like understanding the limitations of the models, identifying potential biases, and making strategic decisions based on the insights the models provide.
Right. Technology can help us crunch the numbers and see the patterns, but it's up to us to connect the dots, tell this story, and make sense of it all.
I completely agree. And I think that's a perfect segue into our final segment, where we'll explore some practical tips and best practices for implementing MMMs in your organization and making sure that human expertise remains at the forefront.
Sounds like a plan. I'm ready to put all this knowledge into practice. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've spent this episode exploring the fascinating world of MMMs, from the nitty-gritty technical challenges to the philosophical questions of causation and the role of human expertise.
It's been a real journey through the evolution of MMMs, especially with Google's research paving the way for their Meridian platform.
It feels like we've gone through MMM bootcamp, but now let's talk about putting all this knowledge into action. How do we actually go about implementing these sophisticated techniques in our own organizations? It can feel a bit daunting.
It's definitely not a set it and forget it type of thing. Implementing MMMs effectively requires a strategic mindset, careful planning, and a willingness to adapt as you learn.
Okay, so where do we even begin? What are the first steps to take?
The most crucial first step is defining your objectives. What are you hoping to achieve with your MMM? Are you looking to optimize your media mix, get a clearer picture of marketing ROI, or maybe understand how different channels are interacting?
It's like planning a road trip. You wouldn't just start driving without knowing where you want to end up.
Exactly. Once you have a clear destination in mind, you can start gathering the necessary data. This usually involves pulling information from various sources, your ad platforms, CRM system, website analytics, and any other relevant data you have. Think of it as packing your bags for the trip.
And just like packing, you need to make sure you have everything you need, accurate data, complete records, and consistency across different sources. You don't want to show up with a map of the wrong country.
Precisely. Once you've got your data suitcase packed, it's time to start building the actual model. This is where you choose the right model type, select the variables, and fine-tune the parameters.
This is where I start to feel a bit overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Any advice for navigating this part of the process?
Absolutely. First, don't overthink it. Start with a model that aligns with your goals and the complexity of your data. A simple model can often be more effective than an overly complicated one. It's like choosing the right vehicle for your road trip. A compact car is great for city driving, but you'll need an SUV for off-road adventures.
Makes sense. What else should we keep in mind during the model building phase?
Always be aware of the potential for bias, which we talked about earlier. Take steps to mitigate those biases as you're building the model. It's like making sure your car's navigation system isn't biased toward toll roads if you're on a budget.
And don't be afraid to experiment a bit, right? Try different models, tweak the variables, see what gives you the most insightful and reliable results.
Exactly. It's all about iteration and refinement. Think of it as taking a few detours on your road trip to discover hidden gems and scenic routes. You might find a better path than the one you originally planned.
Okay, so we've defined our goals, packed our data, built our model, and maybe even taken a few detours.
Yeah.
What's the next step in our MMM journey?
Now it's time to make sure our map is accurate. You need to validate the model, testing its accuracy and reliability using historical data that wasn't used in the initial build. It's like checking your map against real-world landmarks to make sure you're on the right track.
And if the model's predictions are way off, it's back to the drawing board, right?
Exactly. You'll need to refine the model until you're confident that its predictions are aligned with reality. But once you've got a validated model, you can finally start using it to make informed decisions.
This is where it gets really exciting. We've reached our destination, and now we can explore all the possibilities.
Exactly. You can run different scenarios, see how changes in your marketing mix might impact your outcomes, and get a clearer picture of where to invest your budget for the biggest impact.
It's like having a GPS that not only guides you to your destination, but also tells you the best restaurants and attractions along the way.
I like that analogy. But even with the most sophisticated GPS, you still need a driver, right? And in the world of MMMs, the drivers are the people who design, build, and interpret these models.
That brings us to another important point. We've talked a lot about the technical side of MMMs, but what about the human element? What kind of team do you need to build a successful MMM program?
You definitely need a diverse team with a range of expertise. First, you need your data scientists, the architects of the MMM. They're the ones who build the model, analyze the data, and extract insights.
They're like the master mechanics who keep our MMM engine running smoothly.
Exactly. But you also need marketing analysts who understand the business context, the marketing goals, and can translate those data insights into actionable strategies.
They're like the navigators guiding us toward our destination and helping us understand the map.
Perfect analogy. And of course, you need strong project managers to oversee the entire process, keeping everything on track and everyone on the same page.
They're like the travel agents making sure all the logistics are taken care of so we can enjoy a smooth and successful journey.
Exactly. And it's crucial to have buy-in from leadership. MMMs require investment, and sometimes they challenge the status quo. Having support from the top ensures the program thrives. Think of it as getting approval from the airline's CEO before you launch your new route.
And it's not just about having the right people on the team right. It's also about creating a culture where everyone values data and uses it to make better decisions.
Absolutely. It's like having a team of travel enthusiasts who are all passionate about exploring new destinations and discovering hidden gems. Everyone is excited to use the map and share their insights to make the journey even better.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We've covered so much ground, from the technical complexities of MMMs to the practical considerations of building a team and fostering a data-driven culture.
It's been a real pleasure exploring the evolution of MMMs with you, especially as we see the impact of Google's research on the field.
And before we wrap up, I want to reiterate a point we've touched on throughout this episode. MMMs are incredibly powerful tools, but they should never overshadow the human element of marketing.
Couldn't agree more. Data can illuminate the path, but it's our human ingenuity, creativity, and empathy that ultimately drive meaningful connections with our customers.
On that note, it's time to conclude our MMM adventure. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. We hope you've gained valuable insights and are ready to embark on your own MMM journeys, armed with knowledge, a great team, and a map to success.
Happy analyzing!